I'm Leslie Elliott Boyce, and this is the Radical Center, a recording project I began in 2022 as a way to describe and discuss the social and ideological currents that are rapidly altering our culture. In a time when political polarization seems to be the norm, I'm seeking to understand rather than react. I'm grateful to all the thoughtful men and women who share their stories and insights with me in this conversation series. If you would like to contribute to this project financially, there are links in the description. Thank you, and thank you all for listening and being part of this exploration. Well, today I'm speaking with Michael. And Michael, you wrote to me after the recording that I posted with Dev, the conversation with a current counseling student.
Yes.
And if I understand your situation a little bit, you are an audio engineer, you're in the music industry, but you used to be a mental health therapist, and you left
Correct.
that field at some point because you felt like it was actually doing more harm than good.
Correct. Yeah, that was like nearly 15 years ago I left.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good long time ago.
Yeah. I started in the public sector.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And I was finishing up my degree. I was full-time school, full-time case managing, finished. And then I was asked to move into the private sector. And I was like, oh man, I won't have 100 people on my caseload anymore. This is going to be great. They gave me the money I asked for. And I lasted 3 years there. And I walked out, and I've never worked in the field since.
Wow, there's so many things I want to ask you about, or so many aspects of your story that you've just briefly gone into with me that I'm curious about. But one of the things that you said right before we hit record was that some of the reasons you left the mental health field, now they're showing up in other aspects of your life, and it's like you can't escape some of these things. And I'm wondering, how does that relate to ideology, social justice, and just other things that you've been experiencing socially and culturally?
Okay. I did write some notes, so I stay on task because I'm very nervous. This is the first time I've ever talked publicly about this. I was even considering maybe I shouldn't be on camera. And then I was like, what am I doing? This is my life. I know I'm not a bad person, and it's okay, I guess. And I'm still wrestling with that I'm thinking of things so much differently now. And so to answer your question, similarities, it all starts with compliance for me. The reason I left the mental health field was because the last place I was working, and I've worked at a lot of places. I'm almost 50 years old. So I've seen a lot all over the United States. And I'm not going to generalize and say everything is bad, because I haven't been to everything and I haven't met everyone. But in my personal experience, every single place that I worked, every single place that I even tried to get help for myself, I used to have a drug problem 25 years ago. I still have a lot of mental health issues, and not to get off track, but I'm currently struggling to find people who want to treat a person rather than perhaps, it's just so ideology based, like you said. And so what I noticed working in the field and when I was a patient or a client, it's all about compliance. So I'll give you an example. Most of the places when I was a kid and I was in and out of treatment in hospitals and all that stuff, essentially what they do is they want you to follow the rules. And if you don't, you get punished. And I think I don't know, I'm not going to speak for you. It doesn't work. You force people to just lie. And so when I got into the field, it was really my goal to destroy that whole climate of fear and try to allow people to be honest without fear of, sorry if you hear my cat, without fear of getting in trouble. Because I myself, I left a rehab once, and I had won best patient for the month or something like that. And I mean, I was doing drugs within an hour of leaving.
Okay. This is when you were
a kid,
in your early 20s or late teens?
20,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And so then fast forward, gosh, a long time, and I'm in the
Hmm.
field. And what I started to notice was everybody telling their therapist what they want, what the therapist wants to hear.
Hmm.
I'm doing so good. I'm following the rules, this, that. We go to our staff meeting
Hmm.
and we start staffing these clients, and the therapists themselves were saying, my client's doing great. They've changed. They're
Hmm.
not breaking this rule and that rule. And I'm thinking to myself, like, for whatever reason, I always kind of like heard whispers of what was going on. I would usually be the guy that they assigned with quote unquote problematic younger men.
Hmm.
Um, Even like I only have a BA in
Hmm.
psychology, and I remember our trauma specialist was she had a PhD,
Hmm.
and she was constantly getting fed up with certain people and referring them to me.
Okay.
I'm like, I'm so underqualified to be working with this trauma population. I was more of
Hmm.
a chemical dependency dual
Hmm.
diagnosis guy,
Okay.
and I'm talking about severe trauma. And essentially, during the meetings with these patients who were formerly seeing the trauma therapist, I just, at the end of my tenure, I just didn't care anymore. I was like, I got to do what I got to do to be able to sleep at night. And
Hmm.
so I would ask these patients, and invariably it was the same thing every time. So everybody thinks you're doing great, and they want to discharge you, and you're gonna not do drugs anymore, and life is going to be perfect, and
Hmm.
that's wonderful because that's what we're hearing, and everybody's saying you're doing great.
Hmm.
What would you tell me if I said to you, I am not going to break your confidentiality. I'm not going to talk to the rest of the staff. I'm not going to, this is you and me right now in this room.
Hmm.
You can be totally honest because I'm not going to punish you for telling me the truth. A lot of these times the clients were like, I'm still using drugs in the treatment center. I've been
Hmm.
lying to my therapist the whole time, but I have no choice
Yeah.
because I'm not allowed to talk about the truth. If I do, I get in trouble.
Right.
And essentially that's what's happened in my music career is similarly you see things. I saw things that I found extremely troubling, and I just shut up about it. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to rock the boat.
Hmm.
As I mentioned before, it was Benjamin Boyce's series on Evergreen that opened me up to it. Like when I saw it, something didn't feel right inside of me.
Hmm.
And I shut that part of myself off and just continued to comply, say what everybody wanted me to say and
So
do
at
that.
that time, you went, and this is reference to a conversation we were having before we started recording when you mentioned Evergreen. You said that you were a social justice warrior at the time. So
Yes.
you would have aligned with some of the things that the kids at Evergreen were in favor of, but something about it was jarring for you. What was that?
Well, I guess it's like I thought I was aligned.
Okay.
And so I'm watching this, and it's almost as though I was like, I have to believe they're doing the right thing because this is the way it's supposed to be
Okay.
intellectually.
Yeah.
My gut was like, why are they holding the staff hostage and not letting them go to the bathroom? Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
and then I really started thinking about it. And when he did that piece, it just, I was like, if this is the way that a certain group of people wants, if they think they're changing anybody's mind, it's not going to work.
Hmm.
But what I continue to see is forced compliance. People will just say okay
Yeah.
and not question because they're afraid of getting canceled. And then ultimately, what I think that does is creates a silent majority.
Hmm.
I think the election is a very good example of that. And I'm not a political person at all, but I mean, what is this? The second time people were like, I can't believe this guy won. And to me, what that indicates is that there's a lot of people who aren't saying, they're just shutting up.
Hmm.
And when it came time to vote for the president of the United States, I think we saw
Hmm.
that perhaps things aren't as accepted universally, or rather in this country anyway, as perhaps I thought they were. And maybe that a lot of people think they are.
Hmm. That's a really interesting analogy, drawing that illusion of compliance, that surface level compliance, um, with the patients that you were working with in that rehab versus the people going into the voting booth. Like both are giving this surface level indication that they're on board with whatever's expected of them, but secretly they're still holding out, but they're afraid to say that out loud because they're worried
Why is
about
that, do you think?
punishment.
I mean, what's your take on that? Like, why do you think? I mean, I know for me, I just didn't want to lose my job, which invariably ended up happening anyway, which we can get into. But
Mm-hmm.
it's not that I lost my job. I chose to step away and figure this out before I put myself back out there in the
Mm-hmm.
music world because um, it's such an echo chamber,
Mm-hmm.
and you're obviously familiar with like the Milgram experiment and
Mm-hmm.
the Stanford prison experiment.
Mm-hmm.
I was always obsessed with those, even as a young kid.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like I'm seeing it play out in real time.
Mm-hmm.
People are just doing, they just don't want to I think what it boils down to is compliance equals acceptance, and
Mm-hmm.
we want to be accepted.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I
where
think
I'm
so.
at.
Well, in when we started talking, you mentioned being nervous because you haven't really talked about this, and you were like, "Well, maybe I should have my screen off," which
Yeah,
is totally fine. I mean, if you decide that you want that, I can
nope.
not show your video. But that fear, I think, when you've got an authority that presents an all or nothing option for you, like you either do this or you are condemnable,
Yes,
then you're going to set up a scenario in which a lot of people are going to they're going to be so afraid of reprisals or punishment that they're going to try to give the illusion of going along, and that's just kind of human nature.
it is. And, that really became evident when almost 2 years ago, I had my incident in the music industry.
Mm,
And I got so much support privately,
mm.
but
Oh wow.
nobody wanted to say anything publicly.
Wow, do you want to say a little bit about what the incident was? Can you
I'd
talk
love
about it?
to. I mean, that's ultimately why I had to reach out.
Okay.
Like I said, it was shout out to Dev. Like that was his episode is what
Hmm.
it gave me the courage. It kind of made me realize like this is clearly I interpreted him to be a very good person, very
Hmm.
open, and
Hmm.
he said it perfectly. I just want to help people,
Hmm.
and like I feel like I'm not allowed to or I'm not good enough based on things that I can't control.
Hmm.
And he was shaking. I mean, and I'm that way
Yeah.
too. I mean, I'm shaking right now.
Hmm.
Um, Ultimately, what happened to me about 2 years ago, I'm a mastering engineer and I was running a record label. And I had put out a project by a two-person band in Chicago.
Hmm.
And this, I don't know whether I should start with this part. Well, I'll just tell the story. Ultimately, I put out their record. The
Hmm.
reason I even ended up working with these people was because a friend of mine in Chicago, who I'd been working with for a couple of years, had suggested to them that they reach out to me about their
Hmm.
new project.
Hmm.
They happen to be a couple. They're Black transgender people in, like I said, Chicago, and they're a great band.
Hmm.
And they had really bad experiences, I guess, with other record labels, feeling they were being exploited. People were being transphobic,
Hmm.
racial issues, whatnot. And so this guy said, "I think you should talk to Michael."
Okay.
Um, I had put out his record. It had been like 8 years I'd had the record label at that point. And so I was like, "Oh, cool. I'll get to help these people out." And that's my first. I realize now all of the things I'm about to tell you are my own fault
Hmm.
because I put myself in a position of I can help these people out. Like very white savory.
Mm. So it was
Um,
like identity. I can help these people.
it was totally based.
Okay.
I mean, I loved the music, but I will fully admit that
Hmm.
had it not been a transgender couple, I don't know that I would have been so
Okay.
ambitious about working on the project.
Okay.
Um, and so they were like, "Can we talk to you on the phone?" We did. And they basically interviewed me. Um, and again, I was like, this is the way it's supposed to be. Things are changing. This is good.
Hmm.
Um, as I said, I'd seen Benjamin's thing on Evergreen. So that was always in the back of my head during these
Hmm.
interactions, but I had to shut that part of myself off. And these people essentially dictated the terms on which we were going to work.
Hmm.
80% of the money was going to go to them. I was going to pay for all the artwork, and for their album, I was going to handle getting their record distributed
Mhm.
internationally, and I would master their record on the house as part of them
Wow.
hopping on the label. Yeah.
That's not a typical arrangement?
Oh no. Uh,
Okay. It doesn't sound like it
that's
would
why I
be.
don't make music for a living anymore, because I just don't. You're not going to make money. And
Okay.
again, I did that because I was like, I want these people to have a good experience versus
Uh-huh.
what they've experienced in the past.
I see. Okay. So there was a little bit of like a soft heart for the underdog sort of feeling that you were having.
Absolutely. And that's what I thought. I didn't even see it as that at the time. I didn't
Okay.
think anything, but that's
Oh,
exactly what I would. But then I take it to another level, and it's like, well, if I put myself in a position of thinking I can help an underdog, that creates a power dynamic.
right.
It puts me here saying,
Mhm.
I can help you, you're marginalized or whatever.
Okay.
And now I'm realizing that's probably the most transphobic, racist thing I could think. I'm treating people differently based on how they identify and how they look.
Hmm.
And in that, thought I was doing a good thing. Um, Needless to say, some time goes by after the record came out. It did okay. And then, records usually sell pretty well for like the first couple weeks or whatever, and
Hmm.
then it just dies off.
Hmm.
Um, and so like literally months had gone by, and we hadn't had any sales on the Bandcamp page where it was available, so you could actually just buy it rather than
Hmm.
stream it or whatever. And so anytime we would get a sale, I made sure to pay them immediately, even if it was like $3, just because, just the right thing to do, and then I don't have to worry about forgetting.
Hmm.
And ultimately what happened was one day we got a sale. It had probably been like at least 4 months since we had had one,
Hmm.
and it was for like $5 or $4 or something. I don't know. Anyway, I send the money over, and then I get an email from one of the people in the band saying, I think you messed up because you sent $2.80 and it was supposed to be like $4 or something.
Okay.
I forgot about this. Or no, I think it was an 80-20 split that they had. Needless to say, I thought it was a 70-30, and so I missed it by, I think, like 60 cents.
Okay. Okay.
So I just immediately I said, oh, sorry. And so
Yeah.
I actually sent like an extra 20 cents. Because I put it up to like an even number.
Is 70/30 more typical? So that's just the math you were
No,
doing?
if you're working
No?
with a record label, you're lucky to get 50-50.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm not Warner Bros., I'm not Universal. So it's not like we're dealing with Justin Bieber or anything like
Okay.
that. I mean, it's independent music. But still, even if it's $3, it's like this artist earned $3 off their
Right.
music. I want to make sure they get it.
Hmm. Okay.
And so I apologized after I sent the correct amount.
Hmm.
Well, actually, I sent a little extra and I apologized.
Hmm.
And with the apology in this email, I said, how would you feel about if we just migrated everything to your Bandcamp page so you can sell directly? So I don't have to worry about screwing up, sending you $4 every 6 months or whatever. You can keep 100%.
Oh, you're just handing it over to them.
Yeah, I said you can keep the artwork. I already, handled
Okay.
that, done. And I'd already mastered the record, so whatever.
That sounds really reasonable considering that you're having to trouble yourself with these tiny little things for something that's not moving
I
much.
would have continued doing it had I not screwed up by sending
Okay.
70% instead of 80%. But I got lambasted.
Mm.
And so I said, I'm really sorry that I screwed up, but like I don't necessarily think this is the sort of thing that like I need to be attacked over.
Mm.
And it got so ugly in this back and forth email exchange that finally I was just like, look, I'm done. And I'm just trying to give you all of the money.
Mm.
I don't want to manage this at all. You can have the master, everything.
Mm.
And needless to say, it didn't go well. And then I started getting Twitter notifications. And I'm going to read you something.
Okay.
Um, this was like the first thing I read when I was like, oh boy, I'm canceled. I'm in
Oh
trouble.
gosh. Okay.
So this is a tweet, and it says, and this is one of the people in the band tweeted, this is the DM I sent to Michael so I can peacefully continue my day being a decent human being. Under which they wrote, hi, just wanted to this is what they said to me, that they shared on Twitter saying, now I'm going to go about my day being a decent human being. I just wanted to personally let you know that you can enjoy deluding yourself. I know how you've treated me. Seek help. You're hurting people and having no positive impact on their lives. I don't care what you tell yourself to sleep at night, which you probably don't. Your behavior and the way you talk and deal with people is trash. I can tell and has been for some time. Good luck getting much needed help. You're a shit music professional. Please quit. In the meantime, do not reply under any circumstances. I simply do not care what you have to say ever! Exclamation point.
Mm.
And as I said, that was shared. And they said, DM I sent to Michael so I can peacefully continue my day being a decent human being. I was like, ouch.
Yeah.
And it just kept ding, ding, ding. Then I went to my phone and I looked at Instagram, and they had enlisted all of their friends. And I got so many death threats, people telling me to kill myself.
Wow.
I'm not allowed to walk on this earth. I'm a transphobic racist who took advantage of these people. I deleted all my social media and went to a serious depression.
So just to recap, you went through, you'd made this arrangement with this band, and you were working on trying to give them the sales of their
All of it.
proceeds.
Yeah, I want them to just take 100%.
And then there was some disagreement over
They said it was
finances.
because I just didn't want to work with them, and I said no. I
Okay.
don't want to. I don't want to
Okay.
send
So
you
when you
$4
said
every 6 months.
when
Yeah,
you said why don't you guys take it over,
yeah.
that was the thing that caused the
That's what set
escalation.
everything off.
Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
And then it went straight to that.
Yeah, and then the death threats telling me to kill
Wow.
myself. Um, it was
Wow.
weird because it was all people I didn't know. They just like got a hold of all of their friends and said,
Hmm.
DM this guy. And then they
Okay.
did the same thing on Twitter.
Okay.
And like I said before, what was so awful was so many people were hitting me up privately to say, are you
Hmm.
okay? Like, we know you're a good dude. Like, what's going on? This isn't
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And it was great and everything, but then that stuff just kept popping up, and like I was just
Hmm.
getting torn apart, and not a single person had my back. Well, actually, that's not true. A couple people did. They chimed
Hmm.
in and they were like, "Are you really going to be acting this way towards somebody who like literally just wanted to give you? He screwed up by 50 cents and paid you within a minute." Like, and they called those people racist, transphobic people, and that should not be allowed to have an opinion about this.
Hmm.
And I cowered and I quit.
Wow. So this was just any disagreement with these people was straight to you're a bigot.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. Wow. And that mobbing online. I mean, I know that feeling. I've been mobbed online, and
Have
it's,
you?
oh yeah, I did after the GenSpec Denver conference. There was this whole thing with this guy in a dress, and I had the wrong position on it according to a bunch of these, I don't know, angry radical feminists, and I experienced a lot of mobbing, even Kelly J. Keene telling people to blacklist my podcast, and it's just
How did
so.
you handle it? Or did you?
Oh, I surprisingly, I was really upset. I mean, I try to think of one of the real concerns I have about contemporary culture and mental health is the way that we're impacted by internet relationships, by
Oh
internet
gosh.
communication, and I've tried to establish, I don't know what healthy means in this context, but a healthy relationship with social media where I don't use it a ton. I'm not on Facebook because that's really toxic. I think I got off of that in 2017. I felt like it was creating dangerous patterns and lots of mobbing behavior there. X, I use it very lightly. I use YouTube to share stuff, but I don't watch a lot of YouTube.
Right.
I use Instagram just with family and friends. So I'm trying to have sort of a balanced relationship with it, but having a ton of people calling me like a handmaiden and all these terrible things, they were kind of like calling me a I don't know. I can't even get back into the labels, but it was more the implications that they knew what was in my heart and my thoughts. And it was very surreal to see my name or things that I've said being characterized in a way that's completely a distortion of my views or my thoughts, and then
Exactly.
see tons and tons of people liking it and sharing it, and it was really scary. So yeah.
Oh, and then the
Well,
worst is like, and then they believe these people just believe that about me.
right. And there's this, and even though I know, and I talk about all the time with clients, and it's a thing that I work on in my own life, that we can't control what other people think of us. We can just control, we're responsible for ourselves. They're responsible for themselves. Allow there to be the space to let go of other people's projections. It's still a really terrifying experience. I think there's something so acutely painful about social ostracism for a good
It's
reason.
brutal. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know how, if you would consider yourself to be a sensitive person or not. I am. And so
Mhm.
it definitely, I mean, I
Yeah.
started to believe the things about myself that people were saying to a degree,
So this was 2 years ago,
almost. Yeah.
and it went on
I mean,
for
that
how
went
long?
on, like the bullying and the telling me to go die. It
Yeah.
was like a week.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
then I just, at that point, sort of, I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And so, oh, you know what? I remember I had a show with my band
Mm.
in Providence, and I asked my bandmate, "Do you want me to not go because I think I'm canceled?" And they're like, "No, like what are you talking about?" I was like, "Okay, I just don't want to ruin it,
Mm.
because of what had happened on the internet." And so I was still really shaken up. We played the show, and
Hmm.
then I got COVID. And I
Oh
remember
man.
when I got COVID, I was laid up for a while.
Hmm.
That's when I really started to think about everything.
Okay. Oh wow. So it started to settle in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and that was probably like, yeah, almost 2 years ago. And then
Hmm.
a year after that, I got Lyme disease.
Oh my gosh.
That knocked me out really bad. And it just gave me more time to think about like what has happened to my career, who am
Yeah.
I, like all of it. And I was watching a lot of your podcast. And I just kind of went I went down that rabbit hole of seeing, I guess, what other people had to say on these matters. And
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
started to hear a lot of very, very smart, good, logical people with a lot of common sense saying things that were considered like by some people to be like outrageous or offensive. And I was just
Mm.
like, I don't necessarily find this offensive. What's wrong with me for not finding this offensive? And then
Hmm.
I realized perhaps I'm not as aligned with everything as I thought I was. And then I realized I don't know if I was ever aligned. I just, for lack of a better word, I got caught up, kind of brainwashed, stopped thinking for myself, and just did.
Hmm.
I did I went through the motions.
Hmm. Hmm. Wow. So it was like this through the convalescence and the illness, this initial shock of cancellation, you were allowed to sort of start to digest that and think
Yeah, because I couldn't
about
really
things
work
differently.
anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And then here we are.
Hmm.
I still haven't really decided what I want to do. I'm
Hmm.
fortunate that, financially I've had the ability to think about things
Yeah.
instead of having to say, oh
That's
gosh,
good.
but I'm thinking I want to change everything up. I don't know that I want to be in a situation where I can't be myself.
Hmm. What do you
It's
think it is that makes you feel prevented from being yourself?
um, ideologies that
Hmm.
if you don't subscribe to, you're going to be ostracized, period. And I
Hmm.
mean, as people often talk about with Hollywood, now it's so out of touch and these
Hmm.
Hollywood liberal elites. The music business is the same thing.
One thing I'm wondering, the I think one of the really psychologically harmful things about internet mobbing is that it gives you this illusion that it's everyone. It feels like, oh, this is the public square and my name has been hung up and there's an effigy of me and everybody sees that I'm this terrible thing and I'm not. And so there's this indignation and this fear and panic, but also a sense that it's broader than it is,
Yeah, I
And
feel like everyone hates me.
Right. And I wonder how many people in the music industry really do feel more like you do. And so I wonder if you
That's
were to start
honestly,
talking about it,
I would.
you'd
I
find
would
them.
love to know,
Okay.
because I know for a fact so many people I've talked to privately. And again, I just want to clarify by saying
Hmm.
I'm still extremely liberal. Um,
Hmm.
this isn't about necessarily. I think the problem with identity politics at the end of the day, for me, is that
Hmm.
I can't hold somebody accountable the way I would somebody else based on the way they identify. And I feel that the way these people
Hmm.
treat me,
Hmm.
they had just been some person and not been,
Special identity X. Yeah.
it wouldn't have ended well for them.
Hmm.
Like I don't put up with that sort of abuse.
Okay. Yeah, you would have
And in
called
this
it
one, I
out a
rolled
long
over.
time ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Hmm.
I haven't changed. Like by no means like, oh, like time for me to move over to the right. And I'm
What does
apolitical.
that mean to you at this point? Like, what does it mean to be liberal and what does it mean to be on the right?
Um, I think all it really means these days is you're either, I think it's really simple almost, because I don't think it has anything to do with politics. I think it has to do with the way one wants to be viewed by society,
Mm, mm.
maybe.
Interesting. Okay. Is
Mm-hmm.
that what it is for you when you say that you're still very liberal?
I don't care how I'm viewed by society in regard to my politics anymore. That's one thing I'm certain of, because it's done
Okay.
me more damage than anything. Um, and so what I realized is, if I'm a liberal person, me telling everybody how liberal I am,
Hmm.
like, look at me, I'm so tolerant. I don't think that helps anybody.
Hmm.
I think it's performative. I think it's fake. Anybody can type anything.
Hmm.
I would ask a lot of these people who consider themselves social justice warriors online, would you ever go out and actually risk your safety for something that you believe in?
Hmm.
I'm not advocating for violence or anything like that. Or I'm saying, like, how far do these beliefs really go?
This
Is
is
it when
just
you're
like,
online, or is this your real life? Do
yeah,
you stand up for this?
this is
And I
just
think
like
the answer is
the analogy that you first made. This is
mm,
exactly that same thing. It's the performance of compliance.
exactly, exactly.
Mm,
Compliance, it just scares me. Have you ever seen
mm.
the movie Compliance?
I don't think so.
I highly suggest watching.
Compliance. Okay, I'll check it out.
Based on a true story, but
Mm,
it really kind of goes to show what people will do when they're put into a corner,
hmm.
act into a corner, and they need to produce a certain result that's going to appeal to the powers that be. And it's
Hmm.
like, whoever those powers are, I guess what you do is going to change depending on who you need to please.
Hmm.
And in my opinion, I think, again, the Milgram experiment is a very good example, because I can say, I mean, I obviously can't say with 100% certainty, but as somebody who's been through a lot of bad things, if they had asked me to keep hitting that buzzer when that other person was screaming,
Mm,
I would have said, go F yourself. No, I don't care. Do whatever
mm,
you got to do to me. I wouldn't have done it.
mm,
I've never been one to conform in that way. It's caused me a lot of problems,
mm.
um, and a lot of problems. But I just know deep in my heart that, I'm not going to hurt another person, no matter what. So if somebody's forcing me to do it and saying there's going to be consequences or not.
Mhm, mhm.
And what's so scary is, we saw the results of that study, and I think it says a lot about the human condition.
Yeah, I think that that's true. And I'm curious also, like when you, because I think maybe there's a deeper story there for you. When you were in mental health care, you were working in drug rehab and at some point you decided, I can't do this anymore. This field is hurting more than it's helping. Was it about the compliance issue, or were there other things that you were noticing? What was going on that made you say, I don't feel good about working in this industry?
A lot of what you and Dev were talking about, and what you speak with a lot of people, whether it's about education, postgraduate work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm older. I'm almost 50. So if I left, say, 15 years ago, I was like at the very beginning of when things started to feel, they were starting to feel weird.
Mm-hmm.
And I can give some very specific examples. Like we had cultural sensitivity training and
Okay.
whatnot. It's just part and parcel with being in the field. And it was not the way I'm hearing it is described now.
Okay.
But there was a lot of, I guess you could say, on my way out, it was like motivational interviewing had kind of become like the big, and I'm all for it. I think it's great, you
I
know?
think motivational interviewing is pretty cool.
Yeah.
You
And
liked
that,
it
that was
too.
kind of our model,
Okay.
but it wasn't, because
Oh.
motivational interviewing at its core, you're meeting somebody where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is so they can feel honest, or they can be honest and talk
Mm-hmm.
about what's going on. And I'm like, why am I working in a place that claims to be using motivational interviewing and wants to meet patients where they're at? But at the same time, if a patient says something that may perhaps go against something in their treatment plan, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
rather than talk about it, it becomes punitive. It's like, I'm
Okay.
going to punish this person because they're not telling me the thing I need to hear to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that they're progressing in a way for us to keep billing the insurance, whatever it may
Oh,
be.
interesting. Okay.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of insurance stuff involved too.
Hmm.
And, you know, I remember I was asked to do an assessment, and the client I was doing an assessment on, I asked because we had to have a primary access one diagnosis in order to bill insurance. And this person didn't have one, like in the sense that they didn't have a mood disorder, they didn't have a drug problem nor a drinking problem, and I did not know why I was doing the assessment.
Right.
And so it turned out, because the guy told me, he was just like, oh, I'm just here because my wife was cheating on me and I work in the coal mines and I have really good insurance and I needed a break. And so I called an admissions number, which happened to be your place. And
Mhm.
the guy on the admissions line said, yeah, hop on a plane, come right now.
Wow. So they probably gave him an adjustment disorder diagnosis,
Something. And
something like
so
that.
I said, well, hold on a sec. And I walked into the
Mm.
admissions guy's office. I said, what the fuck am I doing? And he says, what's the problem? And I said, there's nothing, I don't know what you want me to do with this person.
Uh,
I said, I'm not doing the assessment. And he said, oh God, all right, hold on. And so he said, send him to my office. I did. And then the
uh-huh.
patient came back from admissions, came into my office to finish the assessment, and suddenly had a pretty serious drinking problem he needed to tell me about.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And you had already screened for that.
And I refused to complete the assessment.
Oh, wow.
Mm.
Wow.
This
That's
is so
really,
common, by the way.
yeah. I mean, I'm, this is one of the things that I don't know. I, I don't like to repeat myself too much, but I've talked about this a lot, that in my counseling program, we were pretty much told everybody has a diagnosis. You must diagnose. And so we'd be working with another student in the program because we were assigned randomly to other students in order to do assessments and to do, different interviews, different interventions, different theoretical orientations. So everybody's supposed to, I don't know if you had this in your training, but they say, bring a real problem, not your biggest, like if you're on a scale of 1 to 5, don't bring your fives, bring your threes and fours, and actually talk about them with your student therapist this assignment. And then it's recorded so that the teacher can review it and talk to you about your counseling skills or help you to improve or whatever. And one of the things that we were told was, if you can't find a diagnosis for this patient, let the teacher know and they'll help you find a diagnosis because everybody has one. And so that's one of the things that I think about when I see these statistics that say like liberal women are much more likely to have a mental health diagnosis. I'm like, well, anybody who steps through the doors of a counselor's office is going to have a diagnosis because that's,
By virtue of going.
yeah, because that's what they do. That's what they do. And it's all at the end of the day for insurance.
Exactly.
And so I'm glad you're talking about this because it's one of the things that I've been that as I progressed through my training, there were several things that really alarmed me. One of them was the ideology, the social justice ideology, but another one was the medical ideology. And I, uh, I decided about halfway through my program that I was not going to work as a licensed therapist, that I was going to work as a coach, even though I don't like the word coach very
Sure.
much. It's kind of strange to call yourself a coach when you're, it sounds like I have a mitt
Yeah,
and
your baseball.
yeah, exactly. But that's what we call unlicensed therapists. So
Yeah.
I was not interested in this whole DSM insurance scheme
That's
because
why I
most of
didn't
the
get
people that we
licensed
help are
myself.
not they're not profoundly mentally ill. They're just people trying to live and struggling with normal life things.
Exactly. And I think that really actually reminded me of something, which going from the public sector to the private sector, where in the private sector, like I said, there were situations where you have somebody come in and it's like, I don't even have a diet. Like this guy's doing better than I am.
Yeah.
You know, and in the public sector, I actually was working mainly in severe mental illness in a very
Okay.
underserviced area. And when I say like, I don't like saying the worst of the worst, but the most mentally ill people, like I've had just to give a little bit of a sense of what I was doing versus where I ended up in mental health. It's pretty crazy. I mean, I had a client that took out his own eye with a spoon.
Oh my
Um,
God.
I had a client that raped a dog and lit it on fire
Oh my
and
God.
ended up in state hospital patients,
Yeah.
forensic patients, child
So
molesters,
really, really,
murderers.
really profoundly mentally ill, even criminally mentally
Exactly.
ill. Okay.
I understand the need, or perhaps diagnostics playing more of a role when you're dealing with that population.
Oh yeah.
Um, but when your kid's smoking a little too much pot in college and the family's told, he's going to die, give us $40,000 a month
Hmm.
um, so we can fix him. And then at the end of it all, the kid goes home and he relapses in a day. He's back on drugs, and his parents call up. They're like, he relapsed. What do we do? The answer is you send him back to us. And I mean, I had patients at certain places who had been there 4 or 5 times. And it made me
Mm.
really start to question, like, wait a minute, is the patient screwing up or is the treatment not good?
Yeah.
Because if my car was broken and I went to a mechanic and they broke it again, and then I wouldn't keep going
Keep
back.
sending it and they keep sending it
No.
back broken. Yeah.
And they kept saying, well, he wasn't working his program
Mm.
properly,
Hmm.
which is such a ambiguous statement. Um, and
It
I guess the
sends
one
really mixed messages about an individual's agency, doesn't it?
it sure does.
Huh.
Um, and I think that those mixed messages can become lethal.
Hmm.
And I saw it happen, which is one of the reasons. We had a client. He was a great kid. He was a little depressed. He smoked weed and he wasn't doing very well in school. So he shows up at our facility, and 2 months later, I get a phone call on a Sunday afternoon. We need you immediately.
Mm.
This kid had died of a heroin overdose in the treatment
Mm.
center because people were using heroin in the treatment center.
Oh my gosh.
And then the next day, I show up to work and I have to be on the phone with it's me, the CEO, the two owners of the company, and the lawyer for the treatment center on the phone with his parents, trying to figure out how to get the body sent back.
Oh, wow.
That was,
That's
and
so horrible.
I was like, this kid, he was just in college.
He was okay. He was functioning better there than he's functioned in the center.
Now he's dead.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm not saying that everybody was dying, but
Hmm.
for the most part, I don't know that I saw anybody get better.
If you had to sum up what your impression is of how that system is failing people. How would you say it in a nutshell?
Oh God, there's just so many ways because I think insurance is probably the biggest. Like if we
Mm,
were to eliminate insurance and be like most other Western nations, like I think we'd see a lot less of this. I'm
yeah.
curious if you know any statistics about other developed Western nations that, like, what is their rates of depression, suicide, drug use, all of these things, knowing that it's not a for-profit system in these
I'm
places.
not sure because I know a lot of other countries do socialized healthcare, which kind of still triangulates the a third party in
Okay.
between the care provider and the care recipient, you know. So
Okay.
you still have a distortion of incentives when you bring a third party in. I'm not sure. I mean, if we really did just let the free market handle healthcare, even that would create some distortions. So I really don't personally have a great concept of how this could be improved. I prefer free market over third party profit, you know, profit making entity. I worked
Sure.
with I worked in the medical industry for 11 years in two different clinics, about 5 years in one and six in another.
Mhm.
And part of what I did was billing and working with insurance.
Oof.
And
I'm
I
sorry.
saw, yeah, it was I saw enough during that time to see like this one time we needed some tests for a woman who'd had a terrible fall, like a really bad fall. And she wasn't very old. She was probably fairly young, like mid 50s, and had had an inexplicable spell that led to her falling and really hurting herself, like maybe broke something or um and the insurance company was denying. We had to get a pre-authorization for to run tests to see how what was going on with her neurologically.
Mhm.
The insurance company was denying it, just denying and would not give that authorization. And I was just some administrative person. You know, I did a little bit of medical assisting and mostly did administrative, like office managing work. And I knew this lady, this patient, because she'd been a patient at this clinic for years. And I was really appalled. And I spent a couple of hours on the phone, you know, escalating and getting through to different people. And I was so upset by the time I'd gotten through this. And I finally like just had I basically like badgered this insurance company into giving this prior authorization. And after I got off the phone, I was like, why the hell should that ever have to happen? This person has seen a doctor, and the doctor has said, you're I'm concerned, let's do this thing. It should be a simple matter of the doctor said, let's do it. The insurance company stood in the way, and it took some crazy situation where the administrative lady had enough time to badger the insurance company all day. And that's not even the worst example. It's
If it
just
wasn't for you, she never would have gotten the help she needed.
no. And I that was above and beyond. I shouldn't have had to have done that. I mean,
Yeah,
I had a lot of other things I had to neglect in order to do that.
of course. But I mean, it's just so scary when I think about that. The insurance companies dictate care, not the doctor.
Well, and there's other ways that there's like this subtle medical uh fraud, abuse of the system. Like I worked at this little medical clinic in Texas that mostly worked with geriatric patients. So you had a lot of people on Medicaid, and it was a poor area, so a lot of people were Medicaid and Medicare. And we got at one point we got a DEXA scanner, so it's a bone density scanner, and there was a whole week of every medical assistant and nurse had to sit with all patient files, all the patient charts, and we ordered DEXA scans for everybody who had diagnoses that fit the billing requirement to reimburse for a DEXA scan. So it was all about, yeah, and we did that with a few things. Like we got a neuropathy machine and it was the same thing. It was like, okay, now not the doctor wants this patient to get this because the doctor sees this individual and sees what they need, but can we bill for it? Can we get away with it? Will we get paid for it? And it was, you can see some kind of sense like, well, they have a diagnosis of this, so maybe it would be beneficial for them. But sometimes that diagnosis is just, it's an ICD at the time. I guess it was ICD-9 code that just indicated age, like we're over a certain age, so you need this thing. And not only that, and it was a pretty good little clinic. I don't mean to say that it was terrible. This is actually probably one of your better clinics, but they were threatening that if patients didn't get these tests, they would be dismissed from the practice. And it was
Yeah,
all in order to reimburse. So there's all these ways that even at a fairly good family practice clinic, you see medical fraud and abuse. And it's
yes,
because of the perverse incentive created by a third party payer.
absolutely. It's disgusting. And, that made me realize what you just said made me realize what the second part is that I would change,
Mhm.
which is if we were to, which has nothing to do with insurance, but individualized treatment should be individualized treatment
Mhm.
rather than saying we're going to provide individualized treatment and then just taking the money and making everybody do the same thing.
Mhm.
That's been my experience. And most of these places, I still like, I'm obsessive. I go online to look at old places I've worked or whatever to see what their marketing looks like these
Oh,
days.
really?
Oh yeah. They try to make it seem so modern and evidence based,
Mhm.
but at the end of the day, they're still dropping off clients at AA twice a day. And, you're lucky
Mhm.
if you see your individual therapist once a week. Most of the people that you're working with, they talk about how they have the best clinical team. Um,
Mhm.
these are people who just got out of the treatment center, 6 months ago, and now they're a house manager, and then they work their way up to case man, which I think is great. I mean, but my point is, let's not lie about what we're providing,
Mhm.
because what I will say is that more often than not, somebody would show up and they'd be like, well, I thought this was supposed to be a pretty progressive, like holistic,
Mhm.
individualized treatment. This wasn't supposed to be like everywhere else. That's why I'm here. I just have to tell them, sorry, man, you got lied to. We're just like everybody else. We're not doing anything special. All we want is to know how messed up you are so we can bill for the highest level of care for as long as possible.
So you really started to see this around 15 years ago when you were
Yeah.
working. And then it was more recent because you described that feeling of watching the Evergreen story and kind of being a little overwhelmed by it and sort of shutting it down.
Yep.
And so it's been sort of a gradual connecting all these dots and seeing a larger picture for
The
you.
same thing that happened when the emperor had no clothes, per se, with the treatment. When I was working in treatment,
Hmm.
it's happening again.
Hmm.
Um, things have like the evergreen thing really, because just from a basic human decency standpoint, I
Hmm.
don't care how much I like you or agree with you like I'm not going to lock you somewhere and let you not go to the bathroom. It's just
Yeah.
big.
Yeah.
And frankly, I don't think that you're going to change anybody's mind to come over to your side by, and
Hmm.
therein comes the compliance that I speak there. We'll just say, okay, okay.
Hmm. Yeah.
We've seen a lot of the okay for a
Hmm.
very long time now. And I think I think we've already started to see the backlash to that. And I think sadly, the people who are getting hurt the most are the people who are truly marginalized, but are being represented by bad faith actors.
Right.
I have a lot of compassion for anybody struggling with anything, and I can't imagine what it would be like to struggle with gender. And I
Hmm.
do know people legitimately just this is something that is just taken over their lives, and it had for a very long time, and it continues to. But it's not. It had been an issue long before it became a popular thing to talk about on the internet. And I'm starting to question whether or not everybody is what they say they are, or
Hmm.
perhaps I think we have the social contagion aspect. I
Hmm.
think we have a system that values victims more than we what's the word I'm looking for? Victimhood is kind of an asset to a degree. Um,
Hmm.
and that I don't think is good because
It is. It's an entitlement. And this is how I think of the social justice model.
you tell me.
It's entitlements and encumbrances. So if you use the word privilege, you could just say encumbrance. You could say like
Yes.
something that you owe back. And if
Mhm.
you use the word marginalization, you're talking about an entitlement. And that's why victimhood and victim identities become these prized things that people want to hold on to because it's kind of like a ticket that says you owe me. And so this is all fueled by resentment. I mean, it's all a massive scheme to engender resentment.
Yeah, no pun intended.
Mhm.
But I would say also that that's totally true, and I think it allows people to behave badly
Mhm.
because they're not going to be held
Yeah,
accountable.
you're excused.
You're excused.
Mhm.
Telling me to kill myself is okay. I'm a white dude.
Mhm.
I don't matter. I mean, to these people and the people that they
Yeah.
surround themselves with. So for them to have a call to action for me to harm myself, kill myself, whatever it was that
Mhm.
quit music, all of it, um, it was so normal. It was like it
Mhm.
was almost as though that's completely acceptable behavior. And I
Mhm.
don't think that's acceptable. I don't care who you are, white, black, gay, straight. You don't treat people like that.
Well, and I think something that you're talking when you talk about that experience that you had online, I mean, you're a grown man with a career and, you seem like a strong, capable, competent person. And yet those words from strangers online, they still hurt. And that's the thing I think people don't recognize is like, you're not the human aspect doesn't go away. Nobody's so tough that they're not impacted by those horrible words that people are saying. And you can develop a perspective on it. You can try to be boundaried about it and try to recognize, well, people are just behaving badly. But when we're all engaging in the system, you're putting in your own investment to engage and communicate in this way,
Yeah.
and thinking about your intentions as you invest in that system. And when people come back at you with horrible epithets and slurs and unfair accusations and slander, it hurts you. It hurts you in a real way because you're a real human being in a real human community.
They wanted it to hurt, which is what
Mm.
I'm still I'm wrestling with.
The cruelty of that.
The intention was to, like, I think if I had unalived myself, as they say on YouTube these days, I think they would have
Mhm.
been perfectly, I think they would have been happy. And I wouldn't say that necessarily about, I don't know that anybody in that situation who says things like that would end up feeling happy if something
Mhm.
horrible ended up. I
Mhm.
think these people, just based on what I know of them and how they've treated myself and other people,
Mhm.
they really wanted that. And
Mhm.
that scares the heck out of me.
This is why I don't agree that this is a system of weaponized empathy. I think it's weaponized resentment
I think so
because
too.
empathy doesn't it doesn't carry that second component, which is that jealous vengeance.
I think when I reached out to you, I said that it was like you could almost, there was just like this, they wanted blood.
Hmm.
And I just think, when I read that tweet to you, I, as somebody who worked in mental health, I see that as somewhat delusional.
Hmm.
I'm going to
Hmm.
go about living my day as like, it's a very unregulated
No, it
thing to
sounds
do,
highly
say.
narcissistic, really.
Yeah.
Mm.
Narcissism is certainly, in my opinion, something that has been one of the cornerstones of this I guess the culture war.
Well, and
Um,
I
yeah,
think that narcissism is a big part of the of internet communication because it is really hard for anybody to fully recognize the humanity of another person behind an avatar and a couple of words on a screen. It's hard for us to, and so it distorts and dulls your ability to view and empathize with that other as a whole person. And it does focus you back on yourself by constantly making you examine how people are seeing you. And so it builds this sort of narcissistic frame for all of us who engage with it. So I do see that as
I
a
do
part of the
too.
problem.
And that's why I'm pretty much off social media now. It it doesn't serve me in any way. Like,
Hmm.
it feels awful.
What's next for you in terms of career? And are you able to still work within this industry and
I
find
mean,
good
I don't know. Like,
clients?
I'm fortunate. Like, I always try to have as many things going on at once, just because that's just the way I am.
Hmm.
For me right now, I would like to get back into music. I mean, I'm
Hmm.
still active, like I'm still available to hire and all that stuff.
Hmm.
But I also made a commitment to myself that I'm not going to hide anymore.
Hmm.
Um, and so if somebody wants to not hire me, for example, because we had this conversation, then I'm really truly okay with that.
Hmm.
And if things don't go away where I feel like I'm going to sustain myself as an audio engineer, I'll do something else. But
Hmm.
whether it's podcasting, maybe doing something related to the field again, but in
Hmm.
a way that I feel is actually helping.
Hmm.
I just want to do something that I feel good about and where I can be honest with myself. That's it. I don't care about money.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, what you're describing about your situation, I mean, it's incredibly destabilizing and confusing and just this is hard. You're kind of trying to figure out the balance between that theme that you've, I think, illustrated so beautifully of that veneer of compliance, the performative compliance, something between that and being able to just authentically describe the truth and say what you're experiencing in a way that is real and
Yeah,
not,
without the intent of trying to hurt anybody either.
yeah,
But we can't
yeah.
even ask certain questions these days without being called something. And
Hmm.
I've realized that I can't live like that anymore. So
Hmm.
that's why I'm really grateful I got to talk to you. It's like a step in kind of affirming that this is the path I've chosen and I'm going to stick to it. Because if I don't, I'm not really good for anything at this point. We
Hmm.
got to be true to ourselves. I firmly believe that.
Well, if you ever want me to remove this video, let me know. But
Never.
I don't ever want to overexpose somebody or make them feel uncomfortable. But I really
Leslie, I had
appreciate
plenty
you
of
sharing
time
your
to think
time.
about this, and like honestly, I think this is. I started. I'll leave you with this. Is I started EMDR.
Oh,
Like I went for 3 sessions. I quit. It didn't work for me very well.
okay.
I ended up
Okay.
feeling worse, oddly. Not to
Really?
put anybody off, like it was
Yeah.
just a really weird thing. But and this is something I very much appreciate that the practitioner said to me. I told him about this podcast. He knew what was going on with these people in Chicago. He said, Michael, no amount of therapy is going to be more helpful to you than being able to be your true self and talk about what actually happened. And I believe that to be true. And I'm happy that there's people out there who are good at this and do believe in actually helping people. And he didn't have to insert himself. He said, I believe
Mm.
that's what you need to do.
Hmm.
And we stopped seeing each other on that. Like, and
Hmm.
I can't say that, oh, my life is going to be fixed after this, but what I can say, it's the first time I've owned this part of myself. And I'm not nervous anymore like I was when we started talking. So kind of feels good.
Well, I think I'm really grateful for your time and for you sharing your perspective and the story. And I hope other people who listen see themselves in part of it.
If
And
anybody ever sees this and wants to reach out, they can email me anytime. Because I have something tells me that there's a lot of people working in the arts that are
mhm,
struggling, that have been canceled for things that perhaps were not,
mhm,
that were it was just erroneous. It was bullying. It was mean. These aren't bad people. And I
yeah,
want them to know they're not alone. You're okay. You're not a bad person. Like
mhm,
I got canceled. My family still loves me. The people who know me still
mhm,
love me. You're going to be okay.
mhm.
You know?
Where can people find you if they want to reach out?
Cartoonist music, all one word. Cartoonist music at Gmail. Cartoonist music is my website, and my YouTube channel is Cartoonist Music.
Okay,
Anything, anybody needs anything, I'm here.
fantastic. I'll put the links in the description of this video.
Thank you.
And I do think a lot of people in the arts will be able to resonate with things that you're pointing to. So
I'm curious to see. But thank
thank
you
you
so
again.
much for taking the time. For real, it was a pleasure. I really, really enjoyed this.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed speaking with you too. Thanks,
Thank you.
Michael.
All right. Take care, Leslie.
You too.